Data Center Carbon Emissions Calculator Tutorial Part 4. VM Calculator. User-defined. This calculator estimates the emissions from instances operated outside the CSPs listed in the VM Calculator CSP. Please note that its database still references data from several major CSPs to quantify your emissions. At the topmost part of the sheet is the reporting period and summary of emissions. The reporting period indicates the period that you would be doing the emissions reporting for, whether it be for the past year, quarter, or half year, etc. This is an identifier of your emission. At the same time, this will direct you on what value will the other inputs have to be to calculate your emissions. Towards the right of the reporting period is the summary of emissions. This gives the total emissions of all the inputs in the table below, which is for the calculation of instance-level emissions. Looking at the table below, there are several inputs required, and each requires different sources. Let's first take a look at the CSP information. Under the CSP information are the instance label, the grid emission factor GEF, the power usage effectiveness PUE, and the renewable energy used REU. The first input is the instance label. This is just an identifier for your server to assign and point which servers are on which rows. After this is the grid emission factor. GEF's default value comes from the latest EMA published GEF for Singapore. This is under the assumption that most of the services used will be coming from the Singapore region. However, on cases where instances are from outside Singapore, the user can input the GEF of that region under the user input value, and it will overwrite the default GEF value. To do that, first you need to identify the region where you will be creating your VM, or where your running VM is currently located. This varies from CSP to CSP. During the creation of instance for some CSP, one of the first few inputs required will be the region where you'd be getting the VM from. In some cases, there will be a generic region located in the interface, and all services obtained will be from that region. That region may be changed whenever the user deems to toggle between regions. After identifying the region, the user would have to find the EMA equivalent of that region that publishes that region's GEF. This is the process required to get the GEF for regions outside Singapore. Looking at the PUE, the default value we have is Singapore's national average PUE of 1.47, but for a more accurate calculation of your emissions, you are encouraged to use the PUE provided by your CSP for that specific region. In this case, this particular CSP publishes PUE values in a quarterly and trailing 12-month manner, choosing which depends on the stated reporting period. In the instance where the CSP only provides PUE using the average of a certain region, we would still suggest to use Singapore average PUE for a more accurate emission calculation. The last input required for the CSP information table is the renewable energy used. In consideration of the principle of conservatism, the default value that we have placed is 0%. Not all CSP has procured REU, and we have deemed it best to put it this way. Again, for a more accurate emission calculation, it is recommended to use the REU published by your CSP. CSPs would usually publish their REU under their annual sustainability report, and it is best to make use of that. In the case of it not being publicly available, you may contact the CSP representative, and they should be able to give you the value for that. The next part of the sheet is the instance information table. Unlike the VM Calculator CSP, which already includes a list of available VM offerings, This section requires manual input, as the instances are likely from CSPs not covered in the database. The first input you'll need to provide is the instance category. The categories considered are general purpose, compute optimized, and memory optimized. If your instance does not fall under any of these, you can select unknown. The unknown option uses the average values of the three categories to estimate your emissions. After selecting the category, the next inputs are the number of vCPUs and the amount of memory. These details are typically available when creating an instance or can be found on your dashboard for existing instances. The last two inputs are the default storage and any additional storage subscription. Some instances include default storage by default. This information is also available during instance creation or on your dashboard. If the default storage isn't sufficient, you may have added extra storage, which should also be indicated on the dashboard. That completes the instance information section. Next, we'll move on to the utilization information. The last part of inputs required before the results is the utilization information table. The default value we have for the utilization percent is 8%. This value has been obtained from various CSPs' data and has been validated through stakeholder engagement and operational data. Again, for a more accurate emission calculation, we recommend using your actual utilization percent. The default value for the annual instance hours is 8,760 hours, meaning the VM is going to be running 24/7, 365 days a year. Again, this is in consideration of the principle of conservatism. In your dashboard, there should be a chart table that represents your CPU utilization, varying from 0 to 1 or 0 to 100% across a time period. You may extract the data from this and get the average utilization percent depending on your specific reporting period, as well as the total instance hours you have accumulated for that specific instance. These inputs should then be placed under the respective columns of the utilization information table. That's it for the VM Calculator CSP. Upon filling in the necessary data for an instance, the respective cell under the status bar column should indicate a complete entry cell. The output column should also display the emission associated with this specific VM. That concludes the tutorial on the use of the VM Calculator user-defined. Thank you very much for watching.